Hi, and welcome to Shifting Left for DevSecOps Success Workshop. We're excited to have you here. Our Solutions Engineering Manager, William Manning, will be hosting us today. We're going to wait about a minute more as participants start to roll in, and then we'll get started. Feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A section at the bottom, and Bill will be able to answer your questions live as we move forward. Thanks.
I'm going to go through and do a quick presentation, and then we'll go through the demonstration. At any point, if you guys have any questions, we can always address them then, or we'll leave them to the end. Also, too, I encourage you to place that into the Q&A. There's actually a Q&A tab that you guys can go ahead and put in any sort of questions you might have, and I'll do my best to answer them as part of this. So, oops, I just did something. What did I do? Let me know when we're ready to go.
We can get started. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, so let's get started here. As stated, I'm Bill Manning, or William Manning. Either or works for me. I've been called worse. I'm one of the solution architects, but I'm also the solution engineering manager for the Americas. And today we're going to be talking about shift left. Right, so I have some informative stuff we're going to talk about at first, why it's important and why it matters to your organization. We're going to talk about, the modern day, things that are going on in terms of supply chain, because this is really, when it comes down to its essentials, this is really a discussion about supply chain attacks and how it can affect your organization. Because let's face it, nobody wants to have a company, be part of a company that's like a headline, right? X company accidentally released X number of customer information based on some sort of vulnerability that was introduced in their software. So today, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go through and we're going to start off with what is shift left in DevSecOps? What does it really mean? And then why does it matter to you as a software developers or a development organization that produces software? We're also going to talk about how you secure your software supply chain. So not only am I going to talk about the shift left ideals, I'm also going to talk about better security also in total, about how you can utilize this to manage all the things you use and the things that you produce. And I'll get into details on that. We're going to go over Artifactory and XRay. And one of the things we're going to talk about towards when I'm going to do a demonstration live. So that'll be fun. That'll be interesting because, demos are always chancy, with actually doing everything live, but we're going to do that here. And we're going to talk about repositories best practices, because this does influence the way you actually utilize Artifactory and XRay and our JFrog platform in general. We're also going to talk about policies and watches in XRay on how you evaluate the binaries that you're utilizing. We're also going to talk about what Artifactory and XRay is, just in case. We're going to talk about IDE plugins and the IDE plugins that are available for like IntelliJ, Eclipse, Visual Studio, and VS Code. I'm a VS Code user, so I'll be using VS Code as my example today. We're also talking about the JFrog Cli. It's a very important tool and how you can utilize that as part of what you do to make everything that you do better. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about GitOps, right? The idea of automation. So, because in some cases, there's a lot of companies that the security, yes, you want to have it at the front level where it matters most, which is what shift left is, but also too, how you can integrate it into your automated build process if your organization is more of a GitOps style. So I'll show some examples around that. And then lastly, I'll just give you a quick conclusion and recap. And like I said, I want to make sure that everybody understands all the pieces that we're utilizing. So first of all, our platform is end to end. This is just a quick overview in case you're new to what we are and who, what we do. We are a company that has over 6,600 customers, 70+% of the Fortune 100. We went public last year, actually back in 2020. So we went public. We are actually governance board members of the Cloud Native Foundation. We are also a CNA. So if you're an InfoSec person, you know that we are one of the companies out there that can produce vulnerability data. So, we're very steeped in this. And we have a massive research team in our Israeli office that goes through and does this on a regular basis. And I'll show you some examples of what they produce, because I'm very proud of what they've done. And I think it's really, truly amazing. But when we look at our products, if you look at this actual comparison here from, the chart of what we do as a platform from end to end, it's from developer to device, code to cloud. I work with the US military and a bunch of agencies, and it's from compile to combat, whatever you want to say in your DevSecOps needs. And by the way, I don't use the term DevOps anymore. I use the term DevSecOps because I think that security is now just it's not just an add-on. It's actually part of the process and part of the mentality that every organization should have when they attack any of these potential issues. So when we have this and you look at our platform, you'll see that in DevSecOps, we have Artifactory to the left, and we're going to go left to right. Artifactory, Universal Binary Repository Manager. So we support over 30 package types natively out of the box. It's a way to maintain and manage all those third-party transitive dependencies you use to build your software, and also the software you produce. Next to that, we have XRay, our security, compliance, and vulnerability scanning. We will be discussing those two projects in majority here. But it goes beyond that because we also have our distribution platform. We have our distribution hub, and then we have our edge nodes. Our edge nodes are basically immutable versions of Artifactory. They're meant for deployment purposes. You can install them in your data center, your cloud providers, whatever, because by the way, just so you're aware, I gave a talk on this a couple of weeks ago, but we are hybrid, we are cloud agnostic, we are multi-cloud, you name it, we work with you, right? So you can design our system to work with however you work best. Below that, we have our pipelines product, which is our CI/CD and the CI orchestration tool. It's actually built in Kubernetes, so it's built for scale. It actually uses YAML as its code base, so it's also something you could check in and check out of your code repository wherever you do. It also does not use plugins; it uses integrations, so you can use full API access for these other integration sites, like Jenkins servers, Bitbucket, Kubernetes clusters, or whatever. And then on top of that, it's customizable. You can actually extend it. So you can write your own custom steps that can be reusable. And then you can templatize everything where all your developers, if you want to have a standard build process, you just have to simply give them a values.yaml file, and they put that in, and you can have a standardized build process. It also provides you with a blockchain style ledger for everything you've done for additional security, and also allows you to do things like approval processes. One of the things we'll talk about today is promotion and how you can promote binaries as it's just kind of a rudimentary best practice, but a way that you can also add in accountability by having things like acceptance, where you accept something to say, I want to promote from, say, development to QA. And then on top of that, things like blue-green testing. And at the very top of this stack here, we have mission control and insight. Mission control is a way to get an overview of how the system is acting holistically, is it functioning, has it been replicating between sites? Because we actually have one of the most top-notch replications. If you are a most massive global entity, I have customers using single instances all the way up to customers using like 38 node clusters around the globe to provide the maximum amount. We have customers putting petabytes of data every day through our solutions. And then we have Insight, which is a way for you to connect it to things like, Splunk or Datadog or anything like that, where you can get actually information around how you're doing in terms of velocity and operationally, but also too in terms of security and vulnerability. And I'll show you some of that towards the end on how, if you're a large organization, you want to get a handle on, are we addressing the security issues that we have and how are we doing over time? I'll show you ways to extract that data through a tool like Splunk. Now, saying that, one of the things that we're going to talk about today is what is shift left, right? And shift left is a very essential thing. The idea of shift left is very simple. When you look at an end-to-end DevSecOps process like I have here, and in this case, I'm utilizing the Artifactory, actually the JFrog platform from end to end, from developer to device or code to cloud, like I said before, whatever you say internally for the things that you do. The thing that we're going to be talking about today is the fact is this little area over here, right? Where I'm the developer. And this is really what shift left is. If you want the maximum ROI from any security product in terms of development, it always starts at the developer. Thus the thing of shift left, because if you were to look at this from left to right, right is your delivery and left side is actually your development. This is why it's called shift left. I mean, it's kind of apparent, right? Now, why does this matter? Well, in today's day and age, the biggest thing is the leading cause of a lot of loss with a lot of companies. We're talking $1.56 trillion in lost productivity and stuff is actually poor software. And I don't mean poor software quality in terms of, does it function the way it's supposed to, but also too, things that fuel that, things that fuel the software you produce, that's poor quality. And the thing is, though, is that 75% of this, is actually caused by known vulnerabilities. This is stuff that is known in your software. That's up 22% since 2018. That's insane when you think about it. Because the thing is that, poor quality software is not just, like I said, the code, was somebody, do a function and they did it and there's a memory leak of some sort and it's not being caught, or, maybe the query times. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in this case, that a lot of these things here is your software depends on other people's software. And I'll talk about that in detail soon. But the thing is, though, is a lot of the software failures is due to poor quality resources that you're utilizing to do your jobs best as an organization. And that the thing is, though, is that a lot of projects are thrown to the side based on things that really have no influence on what you're doing in some cases because of these third-party things on the outside world, right? And that's the thing is that when you look at it, you want to address these issues shift left, right, where they matter most, where the ROI is greatest, because here's the thing is that you're 10 times more expensive to fix the issue when it's gotten further down your SDLC. So yes, we actually do have, I see that there's actually a question here about, do we have examples of how to integrate this into GitLab Ci? Yes, of course we do. And I will actually type an answer to you in a minute, and I will actually shove that in so you can see this as part of it. Actually, I'll just do it right now. We actually just do it right here. Artifactory, GitLab Ci, and I'll just go in here. And I'll just grab this. It's a little older, but it's still very applicable. It still has links to all the sites. And I will actually type an answer to you right now, put it in there and send it to you. And there you go. So when you are going ahead and, the thing is that we're going to address this, right? This is where the cost, where you want the return on this, and you want to make yourselves more, at a greater velocity with same level of security and safety that you want to provide for your customers. This is where we're going to begin, because the front line is the front line. You guys are the troops on the ground that will make sure that, your defenses are strong. So saying that, how do you, securing your supply chain? You hear this talk all the time. I mean, last May in 2021, the US government finally got around to addressing this issue by actually creating a mandate about how to enhance cybersecurity across the board. And in section 4, yes, I did read it. Yes, it was exciting. Yes, you could tell by my face, right? But the thing is, though, is that when there was a section in section 4 where you need to attribute to how the software is being put together. This is the concept, and you probably read it, you've heard about it, it's everywhere. By the way, it's in process in the United States right now as being a law, is the fact that, when you look at software supply chain, right, and you think about this, protecting that is essential. And this is what we're going to talk about next, because you read these headlines all the time. This is nothing new. And one of the things you hear about too is like software bill of materials. And we'll touch upon that today. I want you to understand what that means. But you see all these headlines, a supply chain attack. The thing is that we as developers, I come from, and you can see from my gray, I've actually been doing this for a long time. Over 20, almost 25. Wow, here we go. I'm dating myself, right? 25 years. The thing here is that when you look at this, you see these all the time. And as developers, we have this inherent blind trust, right? I need to get my job done. I need to find a function that will concatenate a string and pull out a value that I need, that I'm going to go ahead and place through my code somewhere. I don't want to write it. I'm going to go look for a library. So I find a library. That works. I try it out. It works, and then I move on, right? I check it off my I check it off my I get my Jira ticket. I go, hey, I implemented that feature. I'm good. Or I look at my function. This is what I need to do. And by the way, I'm done, and I move on. That's it. But we're going to talk about actually what that really, really means when you do that, and the actual inherent dangers you're bringing to your organization. Because last year alone, there was a 650% increase in supply chain attacks, right? And this is why we're here. This is what we're here to address. And when I talk about supply chain attacks, you guys, there's big ones that have been represented over time, right? And the biggest one that everybody kind of like lit the fire under everybody's butts, including US government, the EU, and a majority of the Apex countries, of course, was SolarWinds. You know what? This is not new. This has been going on for a long time. But the thing is, though, 18,000 customers were directly affected by this actual incident. This is a multi-billion-dollar remediation. And you know what the best part is? This was a fourth level transitive indirect dependency attack. In other words, once again, let's talk about the blind faith and trust. That means that if I brought in a library, it brings in its friends, its friends, and its friends. And if you worked with NPM or something like that, you know that's trouble. And we'll talk about that. But the thing is, though, SolarWinds really lit a fire under everybody's butt, right? It was really the kind of thing that drew the catalyst, and because I'll let you know, I mean, the DoD, the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Reserve Bank, all these institutions were affected by this. And this really caused it. But, there was ones recently. Look at Log4j. Oh, my God. One of the most used libraries by everybody out there suddenly becomes the bane of everybody's existence. There's fire everywhere. Everybody's running around trying to figure things out. And we'll talk about that. If you were a customer of ours, you know what? You would be able to have that remediation, that root cause analysis report you have to put together. Are we affected? Some CIO somewhere, CSO says, hey, I read this article about Log4j. We need to know by this afternoon, have we been using it? I had a guy recently who had to do that, and he said normally it would take, he's like, we started to sweat and panic. It would usually take us anywhere from days to weeks to pull together a report for our upper management. We were able to pull it together in minutes and hours. That to me, and he thanked me, and I was like, this is awesome. This is what we do, and this is what it's about. So knowing that, why are software supply chains so prevalent? Why did this suddenly become a thing? It hasn't. It's always been there. It's just that I think, I just make the joke, I think COVID made it easier because there's a lot of people at home that got a lot of time in their hands anyway. But software supply chain attacks are simple, low effort, doesn't take a lot to do what you need to do. You don't need a lot of skill either. You really don't. A lot of these are not exactly, well, I will say SolarWinds was pretty sophisticated. If you're not familiar with it, look it up. A 2-second kind of explanation behind it is it was a fourth level, transitive dependency that was used for another transitive dependency and up the chain, right? Because it's a multi-layer. But what it did is that when it was ingested, and as soon as it actually was activated as part of another dependency, as part of the software, it set off a timer and said, hey, from this moment, 14 days from now, I'm going to start. So it was a timed effect. And when it started, that's when it said, oh, now I'm going to go look for all your ports that I want to do, and I'm going to start opening things, right? I mean, that was pretty sophisticated. That was pretty cool, actually. I'm going to give props to whoever did that. That was a nasty one. But the biggest thing too is it's super easy to spread. It's high speed. I mean, here's the thing is that it's a transitive dependency. And now think about it. I download a file, a dependency I need. And like I said, that dependency depends on other dependencies, depends on other dependencies, blah, blah, blah. Somewhere in there, I've actually gone ahead and put in something. And that thing that I put in is maybe a transitive dependency as part of the community, because it's super easy to become part of the community, it's in there now. And now anybody who downloads 4 levels up, downloads this library, gets my package and let's just call it my gift to the world as part of it. But the thing is, though, is that if you're the company supplier, if you're a software supplier to a company, and they're affected by your software containing this, you have now abused the trust relationship with that company. But lastly, blending into the community is incredible, because the thing is that we're a community. If you're a software development, I'm an open source contributor myself. I've been for decades. The thing is that, I like being part of the community. I like giving my bit. But the thing is there's people out there who will add things like backdoors or malicious code. That's what happened with SolarWinds. So what we're talking about today is when software attacks. The stuff that you use, that blind trust, the thing that you were taught from when you started your CS stuff, or when you started working in computer science, or when you started working for a company, is that you've always had this mentality that there's a repository out there in the world of libraries that do functions that make my job easier, right? That's the thing we need to discuss. And we need to have that, still keep that same naive trust that we have, but also do it in a smart way. And doing it with a set of tools and resources that allows us to operate and still do our jobs, but still ensure safety and security, and not have our company be the headline and not be the guy in the company that caused it, or woman, or whoever. I should probably say that. Anyway, how do they attack? Well, here we go. I'm a developer. I've been given a project. You need to go out and build some code. Yay. I don't even care what it is. I don't. All I know is that when I start building it, I break down my problem statement. I say, this is what I'm going to build. I put together a list of in like an npm package.json and Maven, it would be part of my POM. Docker, I use a base level Docker image, and then I pull in a bunch of, like, say I do a Debian Docker image, I bring in a bunch of apt packages to do what I needed to do. I shove my application in there, it runs. Whatever you're building depends on others. And this is that blind trust. So suddenly I put together the list of resources I need to do my code. Well, when I compile my code, it's all hunky-dory. But what happens if suddenly I brought in something nefarious, some library that I've been using for a while, and suddenly, or I bring in a new library and it contains something nasty in it? I don't know, an RPC call or whatever, or it allows SQL injections, or I don't care, whatever it is. Well, if this is bad, suddenly it's in my code, and if I deliver it to somebody, or I install it in my production environment or whatever, that's terrible. That's a terrible thing. I just actually took my stuff, gave it to somebody, and now I've jeopardized that company, either my company, or I've also jeopardized another company or my user base. So saying that, but that's just not just the front line. That's if I'm a first level transitive dependency. This is something I directly, right, a direct level dependency. I actually implicitly stated that this is the one that I need to use. That's not the way the world works, though. Right? That still is, yes, I implicitly stated it. But if I pull that in, that resource also depends on other resources, because that developer did the same thing I did. I need a bunch of third-party transitive dependencies to make my job, to make something to give to somebody else. Then that brings in all its friends. And the thing is that now, what if one of those actually has a transitive dependency in it that actually has some potential threat? Well, now that's influenced the other one, and we're back to where we began before. I see there's a question here, so before I go to my next slide, I'll go. I try to figure out on my own how to identify log4j with our X-ray results. It was a painful process. What are some published guides and so much from that I missed? We're going to go through that today. Actually, that's kind of like what we're kind of discussing here today. So, the thing is, though, is that once you've identified it, right? Identify that, and you're using a software bill of materials or an Artifactory. Also, you can use our build information. Is the fact that if you do find a dependency that has this, and I'm going to show you how to do this today, and I think this is kind of actually part of what you're asking, is I can say these are the builds that we have that were affected by this potential threat. And this is what we're going to go through and talk about today as part of Shift Left, because let's be honest, Shift Left is just the like I said, the front line, but it extends way beyond this, all the way to your production. Whether you like to admit it or not, when you throw your software over the fence into the next phase of your software development lifecycle, maybe the QA is staging a production, you're really technically not done with it. It's still going to come back to you, and we're going to talk about that. So remember, 85 to 90% of your code base is someone else's. That's a number to think about, right? This is what we manage at Artifactory and how we evaluate it with XRay. Of that 99% of that code base actually contains at least 75% of the software is actually, it contains like one major vulnerability, right? Or it contains a vulnerability. What's scarier is 49% of that contains at least one high vulnerability, one high risk item that could jeopardize your organization, whether it's direct or indirect transitive dependencies. And the thing is 90% of the stuff you is usually outdated by years in most cases, or completely abandoned. And by the way, later on this year, we're going to be introducing a product will actually not only tell you this kind of level of information. Has it been abandoned? Has it been, are there alternatives? what will it affect if you don't do certain things? We're going to have that as part of what we do. Because we think it's our responsibility to provide you with as much information as possible so you can do your jobs better. But the idea here is that, the level of trust that we have is just built into us by developers. I mean, we went into this for a reason, like I said, and there's a blind naivety that we have that when you're pulling this stuff in, that you're just like, it should be okay. But the thing is 74% of the stuff I just told you about can be fixed with a simple update. And we'll talk about that too. How do you do it? Now, by the way, we as an organization do not blindly upgrade any of the libraries. That would be very pretentious of us. That would also not be very good, right? Because in some cases, you might have other people that are utilizing that library too, and you want to make sure that it doesn't directly affect them because it will cause their stuff to break. So there, of course, you need to keep your dev organization, still a well-oiled machine of communication. But at the same time, I want you to know that most of the stuff you do can be fixed with a simple upgrade or a simple patch or a simple fix, and we'll discuss that. So how can you ensure safety as a developer, right? And then we'll talk about also further down the pipeline too as part of the CI process. Do not get me wrong. But the first thing we need to do is we need to discuss repositories, and then I'm going to talk about XRay, okay? Now, before I jump in and talk about repositories, I want you guys to know that, first of all, if you're new to this, I'm going to place in, I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to, place this. I don't know, can I place this in the chat somewhere? I can I? Host and panelist. Let's see here. Can I post to everyone? I can. I'm going to put this into the actual chat just so you guys have it. This is actually our free tier, so you can use this as a sandbox. It's got a very limited amount of space. It's a nice way for you to go in and do this. And actually, just so you're aware, we're going to be using, I have a very fresh, hot off the press instance that I created, and I am going to run the risk of doing everything live while we talk here. This will be fun. So I'm going to use my free instance for this. So let's first talk about repositories, because this is the level in which you're going to want to design the way you do things. And I'm going to show you, and we're actually going to go ahead and we're going to design something. We're going to implement it. We're also going to create some policies and rules. We're going to go ahead and create some watches to represent that. And then we are going to go ahead and test it. And I'm going to show you the various aspects of shift left. So first of all, repositories. So in case you're not aware, we have 3 repository types that we're going to concentrate on today. We have local repositories. These are your binaries. These are your builds. These are the things you upload. These are the things you publish. These are the things that you do as an organization. These are your files. These are the things that you want to maintain. You have remote repositories. This is our lazy proxy. So in other words, any request for a third-party transit dependency, direct and indirect, is mostly direct from you, and then the indirects come in, are proxied through once you've set up your clients who use this. And by the way, we do this natively, and I'll talk about that. But those requests say like npm install blah. That would be proxied through Artifactory. It goes to that third-party remote source. It pulls it in with all of its friends, and then it gets delivered to you. Now, that would be without XRay. We're going to talk about implementing XRay to make sure that when you do those requests, that they're safe and secure and they actually function properly. Now, saying that, what we're going to go do is we're also going to talk about consolidation. So part of that is virtual repositories. This would be your central entry point. This is actually where you would do a majority of your work because it encapsulates both virtual and local and remote repositories. Now, saying that, let's go in and do that, because one of the things that we're going to do is I'm going to show you both. But before I do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and actually create, when I do create these repositories, now I'm not going to do all of these stages here. I'm not. I'm going to do dev, I'll do QA, I'm going to do staging, and I'm going to do release. But you can design your repositories to match this. So as a developer, I push and publish all my stuff to development. When I want to test it, I use our promotion API to promote to the next phase of the SDLC. And by the way, we have a whole bunch of stuff on this in some other courses we offer, so I'm not going to go too detailed into it, but just so you know, you can also change the access controls between each of these. So say I do send it to testing and I have a testing team. I don't want them to develop. I don't want them to publish. What I want them to do is I want them to actually do read only. So they download my binary, they test it. But then I want to use annotate. Annotate is one of the enablement features inside of our access controls where your testing team can publish their results into Artifactory. So this way you actually have all the information around that build that is pertinent to that stage of the SDLC. And then you can have them actually migrate it, promote it into, say, QA and do the same thing. But this allows you to have accountability from its inception to its deployment with all the pertinent information surrounding the build object that you have. So this way, you know everything about it. So for remediation, root cause analysis and stuff, you have all that level of detail that you can use to do your job more succinctly. Now, saying that, let's go in and let's go look at my Lovely instance. Now I signed up, and for my sign up, I'm actually using my GitHub login. So I'm going to go hit, it's going to say, I'm going to log into my instance using my GitHub login. I've already authenticated, I've already given the permissions for me to do what I needed to do. And I'm presented here with a blank, fresh instance of Artifactory. Now I'm going to go shut my little froggy friend down here. I don't need to see it. But when you come in, you're presented, of course, with Artifactory. Here's our pipelines product. And of course, we have a little tab here for security where you can produce things like reports, and also too, when we create violations, you can get some information out of that, but we're not going to concentrate on that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go create my repositories. Now for my instance here, for my example that I put together today, like I said, this is going to be fairly interesting because I am going to do a majority of this live. So let's go ahead and let's create some repositories. So there's some more, some basic ones here. I'm actually going to create some new ones. These are ones that we install by default, if you sign up for the free tier, just so you can get an idea. I'm not going to touch upon projects right now. That's a whole nother discussion, but let's go in and let's go create some local repos. So in this case, for the project I'm doing, I'm going to do NPM. And I'm going to go create my, my NPM repository here. By the way, there is a naming convention document that you can just go in that I wrote years ago that you can utilize and see how I'm doing my naming. But for this case, I'm just going to say test. I'm going to say NPM because this is the package type that I have. I'm going to say dev, and I'm going to say local, right? So this is a test instance. Here's the package type. Here's the phase of my SDLC. And this is letting me know it's a local repository. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to create another one soon in a minute. But I'm also going to say enable indexing in XRay. So by enabling this down here, this is going to say, I want our XRay product to know about this repository for evaluation. You have to enable this feature to have XRay evaluate, because XRay is going to be your frontline defense. But let's go create that repository. Let's go create another one too, right? So I'm actually going to create two more. I'm not going to create all three. I'm just going to create two more. I'm going to create another NPM repo, but instead of dev, because I can't reproduce that, I'm going to say QA. And once again, I'm going to have XRay enabled here. I'm going to create that. Then I'm going to create another one for production. So let's go ahead and let's go create the NPM package for production. Here we go. And now I have the phases of my SDLC. Like I said, I'm not going to worry about access controls or anything like that right now. This is not what this discussion is for. That can be part of our administration. And just so you know, too, by the way, I might as well bring it up. I'll put this in the chat also. We do have our Jfrog Academy, which is also free. It's another free service that we offer. I'm going to go place this in the chat so if you want to go and get more details. But we've actually built this around the concepts of everything from administration to pipelines to management, from developer to DevSecOps, wherever you want, it's all here. Now, I have my production repository, right? And so there we go. So if I were to go in and just show you the ones that I created, here we go. I've got dev, I've got QA, and I have my production. But as stated, 85 to 90% of the build that I'm going to do is going to depend on other people. So let's go in and let's go look at the remote repositories. So I'm going to say add, I'm going to say remote repository. I'm going to go in and select npm, and I'm pretty sure I already have one of these, but I would say npm -remote. There we go. Do I already have one? No, I don't. But at the bottom here, I'm also going to make sure I index an X-ray. Now, there's other things you could do to, like, such as include patterns and exclude patterns to say you don't want to have certain things and you want to have others. There's certain things like that, right? I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to go in and create my repository because I want to make sure we stay on track. So now I have my npm remote repository. Now I'm going to do an encapsulation. Now, the encapsulation I'm going to do in here is my virtual repository. And this is going to be as a developer for my CI process, for my desktop, any developers I have. I'm going to go in and create this virtual repository. I'm going to go in and select npm again. And in this case, I'm just going to say test, and I'm going to say npm. Okay. So test, actually, no, I'm just going to, for this one, I'm just going to say npm. This is a bad name, but I want to be able to, make sure that everybody understands. So I have my npm repository that I'm going to deal with as a developer. And then at the bottom here, you can see I have the list of repositories that are available to me. Now, in my case, I'm going to go look for everything that says test. Well, here's my, here you go. Here's my development repository. Let me grab my QA. I'm going to go ahead and grab my production. So there you go, dev QA production. Now, I also want to make sure I have my npm remote, right? Because I have those third-party transitives. So let's go add that in. So if you look, this is the actual resolution order. So if I was to interact with this and I was to search for a binary, request a binary, it would come through npm and go to dev first, QA, production, and remote. But remember, it's hidden at the bottom here. But by default, if I'm going to publish a binary in, I am going to go and I'm going to deploy it. I'm going to deploy it to dev. So you have to select a default deployment on where you're publishing your artifacts if you are publishing. So let's go in and create the virtual repository. Now I have a virtual repository built. So let's go and talk about XRay next, and then I'm going to go implement it, and I'm going to go run it, and we're going to go look at the results for certain things. So number one, XRay itself is here under the administration tab. You have to make sure you have permissions to access this to do the next set of features that I'm doing. But we have watches and policies. What are they? Well, policies are the rules and the actions you take, and watches is how you implement them. So let's start off with policies first. So I'm going to click on policies. I'm going to go and give this a name. Now, in my case, I'm just going to give it a very simple name. I'm going to say npm, and I'm going to say security, and it could be anything you want, by the way. I'm going to say security because I'm going to look for security issues, and that's all I'm going to call it. Just npm security. I'm going to give it a description and be like, this is this is for all my npm needs. I don't know. I'm being lame here, but then I'm going to go choose a type. Now, the two types we have for policies are security or licensing. Now, in this case, by the way, this is an upgrade feature. I'm going to show an upgraded version of this to kind of show you the licensing, but we're going to go ahead and concentrate, first of all, on security. So what I can do is I can go produce a series of rules. Now, I'm going to take a quick drink. Now, in this case, you can have more than one rule, more than one criteria, and more than one action that you take. So first of all, for this one, I'm going to start off very simply, and I'm not going to do anything when it comes to like individual, security. I'm not going to block builds for right now. We're just going to concentrate on this, but I'm going to show you the functionality. So I'm going to say all sev for all severity. I'm just going to say all sev in this case. Now, when you write the policy, you give it a descriptive name, and in this case, all severities. You pick the criteria and then the actions. Now, if you're to think about this programmatically, criteria is the if statement, and the actions are the then, right? These are the things you do if your criteria is met. And criteria in this case is bad, right? So if you want to, I'm going to go back in because I accidentally hit the mouse when I did this. I'm going to say all sev. Now let's look at the criteria. So you can use CVE as your primer in this case. Now with CVE, you can go in and say, I want to have all severities, or I want to use low to critical, right? That's the severity value that's inside of a CVE. CVE has a severity value and they are either low to critical. Here's a pro tip. Always include all severities at some point. Why? Well, all severities also include things like info and warnings. And there are binaries out there that are in process, right? That are in process of evaluation for potential threats that do not have a CVE or CVSS score associated to them yet. So I always just say, always have that. Don't do any actions, just kind of show what it has. So we're going to say all severities in this case, because I want to see everything. It's my first time running it. I want to see everything there, from critical, low, medium, high, and whatnot. Or say you're a CVSS score shop. We see a lot of more companies doing this, V2 and V3. By the way, if you need to go look it up, right, you just use CVSS score, calculator, click on here. The difference between CVE and CVSS score is the level of information that they actually go ahead and deem an exploit. Right? Is it an attack vector? Does it have scope? Does it require privileges? Right? These are all the things that when they're combined produce a score. So when you produce a score like that, what's nice about it is that in ours, you can say CVSS score, V2 or V3, and you say between, like in this case, between 2.4 and 6.2, I want to do something, right? Because you don't know the level of detail until you look at the issue, but you at least have the aggregate score that CVSS score provides. But in this case, we're just going to stay with CVE. Now, when it comes to what you can do, the actions you can take behind the scenes, this is very important. So if you look here, you can see that first it's going to generate a violation. And this is what we're going to be using today, by the way, for some of this. But there's other things that you can do, and I'm not going to enable them. I'm going to explain to you what they do. And maybe we will, you know what, we'll see how things go. If I have time, maybe I will enable one of the ones that actually cause chaos and mayhem when we're doing it. So first of all, you can go in and you can define a webhook, right? I don't have any webhooks defined right now, but it's a simple JSON post. It'll actually post the data somewhere. I mean, just to kind of give you an example of this, I actually have an interpreter from that I connected to our actual JFrog Slack channel I use for some of my testing, and I'm publishing that. And by the way, just so you also are aware, if you guys are using Slack out there, I can actually just type in JFrog XRay Slack, and we actually do have a Slack app. Here it is right here, just so you're aware. If you are using Slack, you can actually go in and get a big chunk of this data that we're going to be talking about. You can even set up, policies and notifications and properties. It's fully integrated into our platform. But in my case, I'm just publishing. I want to be able to test that I'm actually receiving this information. Then when you apply your policies using the thing called a watch, which we'll talk about next, you can actually set an email parameter list where you say, hey, I want to notify these individuals that, you know what, there's an issue. So you can do that. I'm actually going to check that. I don't want this to error. You can also have notify deployers, somebody who deploys something into Artifactory, notify them that they've actually uploaded something potentially threatening. We also have a separate email notification. This is actually set up so that maybe you have a critical issue or a 9.1 CVSS score and higher. You might have red team. Everybody on red team get together. This is a production level to, this is the world-ending event. We need to go in and get everybody on board. Then you can also do things like you can hook your Jira system up, right? So we have a Jira integration, and this will say you pick your project as part of the watch, which I'll show you, and then you say create Jira ticket. I want to create a Jira ticket, and the Jira ticket will go ahead and contain all the information. Now, the next set of features are part of shift left, and I'm going to go show the developer level in a few minutes, but this is part of it. So first of all, block download. This will actually stop the consumption of any binary historically already stored in Artifactory if a new information is pertinent, right? So a new 0 day or an increase in CVSS score, or maybe the severity level change to critical, right? This will actually stop the consumption of any binary from that moment forward until you go in and allow it, right? And there's information on how you can go in and allow it. Then for shift left, though, if you want to be able to provide autonomy for your developers to go and develop and do the job that they do, That's when you would enable the next feature, which is blocked unscanned artifacts, meaning as a developer, I have the ability to go out and retrieve an artifact and all its associated friends, direct and indirect dependencies, right? And bring them in. They'll be stored in Artifactory, right? So they'll be requested and stored, get evaluated by XRay, and then delivered to the developer. Now, we get a lot of questions, and I'm sure the question is, well, won't that delay my development? Well, one of the things that I talked about earlier in this discussion is how we store the binaries in Artifactory based on this checksum based approach. If you upload a binary or you pull in a binary, we create actually, check to see, we create a unique SHA-256 checksum inside of our file store. We reference it via metadata. So our actual XRay product runs on that metadata as opposed to the physical binary. So when a binary comes in, and it's actually ingested and that checksum is produced, this means that our XRay product will be able to evaluate very rapidly, being able to only have a slight pause and delay in the development, especially. But this will also do not only the direct dependency, but the indirect dependencies too. And this will actually stop it, and the developer will receive a notification that there was a failure. If you're using our distribution product, you can actually do one last kiss before you send it off into the world and say, are you safe? And actually do one last evaluation. And we also have the concept of failed build, which is, of course, we'll send a termination event, to a CI, CLI, to an IDE. And now we just introduced a new feature, which I love, which is, allow grace period. So you can actually say, you know what? I don't want to actually kill the build right now. I'm going to give the developer 3 days to come up with a proper solution behind this to do their job. But let's go ahead and let's just get rid of this. I just want to make sure I have the violations. I'm going to say all severity, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to save this. So now I actually have an NPM security policy. I have one rule that just basically says I want to see everything, and I hit create. Now, I'm going to go into watches now, and this is how I'm going to apply my policy. So let's go ahead and set this up. So I'm just going to say, in this case, this is NPM. It has to be a descriptive name or nom in this case. I'm going to say, all sev for right now, just because, I'm going to say blah. I don't care. Here's where I could go in and put a recipient list. I could say, all right, Bill M at jfrog.com. That's my email address. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to grab my policy. Here's my policy, right? I'm going to hit save. And then I am going to go in and say, I want to apply this. Now, I can apply it a couple different ways. So first of all, we have this concept of projects. I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm only going to concentrate on repositories and builds. So let's go in, and I can say I want every repository that I flagged, individual repositories that I flagged, or I can even do patterns, right? So these are things, we have more details on all this stuff, but you know what? Look at that. I do not have any of the ones that I want to evaluate here. Huh, that's weird. Well, that's actually for a reason. So let's go in and let's go and take a look at what happened, because I get this a lot from customers. That's the reason why I did it. So first of all, as those repositories aren't in my list, let's go take a look. Test. There's nothing here. Well, the reason why is because I didn't index them. So I actually flagged them, but if I go into index resources, you can see that I actually, if I type in test, these are actually the binary, the repositories that are being evaluated. None of them are there. Let's go add them. So let's do a search for test. Now let's go in and let's go and grab all the test ones that I have. Now I'm going to hit save. And now those, if I type in test, this means that now these binaries should be available when I create my watch, because I need to index them. Because the thing is that XRay keeps an indexed list of all the binaries you want to evaluate, because it's continuous. XRay is a continuous evaluation of all the binaries you use, not just the ones that are once they're stored. That's not it. It's continuously looking for any potential threats and issues. So let's go back to watches and policies again. Now let's go and create my watch again. All right. This is good. So I'm going to say NPM. I'm going to say all set. All right, let's go in. I'm going to add my name. I'm going to say Bill M for my email. Let's go do that. Oops. Let's go add that in. There we go. Is that correct? Yeah, that's my email. Let's go in here. Let's go get my policy. Let's save that. Now let's go back to the repositories and let's do a quick thing. It says test. Oh, look. There they are. And if you look in here, you can see that all these repositories are here. But you know what? I'm actually missing an essential one here. These are only my local repositories. Oh, shoot. Let's go create it. But let's go back to my settings again. Let's go back to index resources and let's type in remote because, oh, you know what? My npm remote isn't there. That's weird. Let's go and add that in. Well, here's my npm remote. All right, let's go ahead and do that. Let's save that as part of this. And now that we have it, okay, great. So now I should be able to say remote. There it is. Perfect. Let's go back and look at my watch again. And let's go and take a look. Now, I should be able to go in here and clean up my repositories. And there's my npm remote. Now I've added to the list and I'm going to save it. Now I have a rule where I can go in and look at all severities, okay? So now I could also create one, by the way, with licensing. And just so you know, let's go in and just look at that for a second. Let me go into my other instance that I have here. I'm just gonna log in. This is actually, I feel like I'm inviting you to my place and I haven't cleaned up yet, but I wanna make sure you understand. If you're doing licensing, it's at the same level. So if we go into security policies, if you're one of our customers that actually has our upgraded security, because the free tier just includes just the vulnerabilities, I could select licensing, I could hit add rule, and just so you know, all the actions are the same as security. But the difference is the criteria is, you know, here's all 435 open source licenses on the market. You can also manually upload your own license into here. So you can say, here's my allowed licenses, here's my banned licenses, right? If it's not part of those 435, right, we have disallow unknown licenses. Why is this license not, why isn't one of the 435 open source licenses available? That's ridiculous. Or why does this have multiple licenses? That's another key indicator. So just to let you know, you can also evaluate based on that criteria in addition to that. And by the way, we are going to come back to this instance so I can talk about builds because we're actually not going to do a full build today. When I do this, we're just going to talk about implementation with the free tier. Setting up the builds could take a little longer, but I'll show some examples behind it and the reasoning why this is important. Well, let's go back in. So now we have our rules, we have our policies, we designed our repositories. Well, let's go implement it. So let's go back to Artifactory. Let's go to the artifact browser, and here's my npm repo, right? So let's go ahead and I've got a project and let's go ahead. How do I implement this? So we've actually made this super simple. Let's go ahead and we'll go click on the set me up instruction. So you have either standard or scoped. And the first thing you see here is that when we are doing this, and I am going to be doing this, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to set my npm registry to be set to my, and just to let you know, I've actually, you know, we're going to go do this right now. So I'm going to go copy this. I just copied the text. And now I'm going to go over to a project. And now this is where me as a developer get to do the fun stuff that I do. Here's an npm project. There is no packages here installed. If you look, there's no modules, there's no package package.lock.json. But let's go in and let's publish this here. Here we go. I'm going to copy and paste that. And now I'm actually going ahead and I've set my actual npm registry. Now, I am going to have to go and log in. So I can actually say npm login because I want to make sure it's secure. Now it's going to go ahead and it's going to prompt me for my username. I'm actually just going to go over to my instance over here so you know. In my case, my username happens to be, I'm going to put my email address in. .com. There we go. And username is that. Oh, may not like my my non-safe character because it actually is using my my address. But let's see here. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and just to kind of show you, by the way, I'll share over here, is that I can go ahead and look at my profile. And you can see where my profile, just so you know how you get there, you go edit, profile. And then in this case, I've got an API key, or I could generate a token. So I can use either or if I wanted to. So let's go ahead and copy this. And then let's go back in here. Oh, there we go. And public email is William Manning@email.com. There we go. Oh, it doesn't like my unauthorized header because of that. That's fine. I'm actually going to go do something different really quick. For this, give me 1 minute. I'm going to say user. I'm going to go create a new user because it doesn't like my username, but that's okay. I'm going to say Bill M at jfrog.com. I'm going to go create a new user. I'm going to hit save. Oops. There we go. Password. Hold on. There we go. I'm actually creating a new password. Here we go. There we go. Hit save. Oh. There we go. Let me save that. All right, cool. All right, so let's do this. Let me go back and share, just so you know. So we'll just do this. Normally I would actually do a little bit more debugging on this. I know what I have to do, but let's go in and let's log out. Let's go in and log in as my user, right? So I'm going to say Bill M. In this case, I'm going to put my password in. There we go. Let's do that instead. All right, just hit finish. I don't care about that right now. Let's go back to my UI, right? So I'm going to go in, actually, just so you know, I'm going to go with my profile here. I'm actually going to put my password in so I can unlock the features that I want to do. There we go. I am going to go ahead and generate a new API key that I have for this, so I can do that. I also have an encrypted password too that I can utilize. So let's go copy my encrypted password. And now let's go back in here and let's go try doing npm login again. Let's do that because my other one was actually an admin user. I don't want an admin user. So let's do npm login now. Here we go. I'm going to say Bill M. I'm going to say my password. I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to say Bill M at Jfrog, like I spelled today.com, and hit enter. And now there we go. Now I've actually logged in. Now the thing is that I've actually gone ahead and set my registry as this value. So that means is when I go in and I do I'm just going to do a straight npm install. That's it, straight npm install. And let's say npm install because I've actually set this in my registry. I don't have to do anything else. Now this is actually going to go in and it's going to go request this from my instance. Now remember, this is my free tier. This isn't being hosted on a very, very powerful machine. It's kind of a sandbox that I'm using. But it's actually going ahead and it's going to go fetch all those third-party direct and indirect dependencies. And now all those dependencies are going to be stored in Artifactory. So say I have 1,000 people working on this project. I brought on all these third-party transit dependencies. I put them through the XRay product. And now I'm able to go in and 999 other developers will be able to take advantage of what I'm doing. I should have probably picked a smaller project. This is a pretty big project, but let's see what it does. So as we are going through this, hold on, let me, looks like my trackpad went offline. So there we go. All right. So now it's pulling all those dependencies in. And if I do an ls-la, if I do a vi package.json, lock.json, this should actually, why is it slow? There we go. You can see where I'm actually pulling all my dependencies in through Artifactory. I've actually gone in and done this. Oops. Now let's go and get out of here. All right. So one of the other things I can do here is actually I've used our JFrog CLI tool. I'll just show you. If I do JFrog, I'll clear this first. And say I want to find out as a developer, I've now gone in and done this. I don't want to go to Artifactory because we'll go over and look at the Artifactory stuff in a minute. But let's say I want to go in and see exactly what's in here. Well, we have our JFrog CLI tool. Now, our JFrog CLI tool has a lot of built-in functionality. There's a whole subject on this. You can go ahead and take a look. Well, let's say I want to do audit. I'm going to audit this. It detected that the JFrog CLI said, hey, you know what? This is an NPM project. Let me see the components and build a model around it. It's going to take that model of all the components that I have here and look, I actually right now, as a developer, shift left, using the JFrog CLI, I was able to pull out and see if there was any high items or any potential threats or issues I might have in here. Now, these are all just all severities and stuff, but you can see like, here's the impacted version. Is there a fixed version available? What is the component? Does it actually have a CVS score and things like that? So there are these pieces. So this is one place I can do this. Now, what if I'm a developer, right? Let's go in and take a look. Now, let's go look at my IDE. Now, my IDE in this case happens to be Visual Studio. So this is VS Code. Well, here's that actual same package lock.json that I have. Here we go. Very simple, nice and easy to do. Here's all that information. But I have the JFrog plugin. Now, and these plugins are available, right? So this is the plugin here. And if this link up here, there's a simple instructions. It actually walks you through and says, point it to your instance that you want to use for XRay. Once it does that, and this is connected, you can see where all these pieces and components, right, that I pulled in, it's like 482 transitive dependencies, by the way. And if I show you the package.json, it's actually 3 things in my dependencies, and there's 482 transitive dependencies. But I can show you as a developer, here's the hierarchy of the actual components that I'm using as part of this. Now check this out. Look how deep into the tree I'm going, where I can show you that here's a potential threat. And you can see all the information. Well, it's an ANSI regex, it's 4.10, it's an NPM, it's a production scope because you can do scoped packages, right? So it has one issue. And if I click under the issues tab, it is a high severity level. Here's the actual component, here's the CVS score, and here's remediation. I can fix this. As a developer, I can go in and upgrade the version, in this case, of a particular package, and it'll affect this, and I can address it directly. I even have it in the CLI. Now, the thing is that these are just some of the simple functions that you can do. Now, understanding that, and looking at those things, we could actually go ahead. Now, this one just happens to have, by the way, just so you know, I'm going to go and show you just some quick information, right? So let's go in and take a look at the actual my UI. Well, let's go ahead, and if I take a look at my packages, you can see here's all the packages that were just downloaded. These are all the potential things that I just brought in as part of my things I brought in. I can also, at any point, I can click in here and I can actually show you the individual versions I have. I could show you, here's all the README instructions on the actual components. If it's attached to a build, which this one isn't, I can show you where it is. But I can also click in here and say, oh, hey, by the way, here's the actual component inside of Artifactory. I can show you its information, and I can show you and say, remember I talked to you about transitive dependency layers? Well, this body parser here has in total 10 other dependencies it brought with it. I can see its permissions, right? I can even look at XRay. Now in XRay, this is going to let me know that there's no violations and stuff, but also if I had the upgraded version, it actually could show you where the actual license is for this component. But I can also go in here under the watches and violations, and let's see if I have any issues here. Because now remember, I didn't really do anything other than all severities, but we can actually change that, right? So in this case, severity level of high. Here's the actual XRay component, the actual piece itself. You can actually see that there's 2 vulnerable components here. Here's the 2 other, 2 other in the layer. I can show you the security summary on why this is an issue, and also here's the dependency mapping. So these are all kind of ways in which you can do this. But let's go look at something that was actually built. And it says, assuming your developers, I see there's a question. Assuming your developers build their NPM projects via Docker Compose, will the plugin work with NPM installed inside the Docker container? Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, Jeremy, because I am going to show you that right now. Now, these are just simple examples, what I'm just showing you right now, right? Now I'm going to go one step up. I want to talk about Docker. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about things like you have, when we start talking about, like build integration, right? GitOps and automatic CI, because actually I realized when I went back here is that I didn't even get a chance to show you that these are the things that I was going to demo. So now let's talk about the next part. So in answer to your query, let's go look at a build, okay? Let's go look at a Docker container and a Docker container that's containing an NPM project that was part of the build process, which is even better. And I'm going to show you the advantages of actually correlating all this information. Like I said, I was able to, in a matter of minutes, right? If I wasn't talking, it probably would have been, a lot more information about this, but I actually have a system that has a tremendous amount of stuff in it. And I'm going to show you that right now. So let's go talk about complexity, because this was simple. I created a repository. I created some simple rules, to evaluate. I applied them. I actually integrated into a real life project. I showed you when I had the actual plugin for my IDE. I showed you the CLI, the advantage of being able to actually get it directly there. These are all things that you can do, and it's very simple to start. But let's talk complexity, right? Now, let's go look at something like this. Step 3, create Docker multi-app. This is a build, right? Because one of the things you need to do is you need to know, we talked about transitive management. Let's talk about build management. So in this case, this is actually a Jenkins job. And just to kind of show you, I'll actually close this, just kind of show you how you do it. But let's go in here and let's go see. Well, this is build number 82. It's built by a Jenkins server. So here's my GitOps server. So I have this set up actually, when I check this in, this automatically builds. Now this image I'm going to show you contains a Node front end and a Java backend, and it being hosted in a container. So if I click in here, this will actually bring me directly to build number 82 that produced it. Now this job I have here is actually pulling its artifacts, in this case, the Node front end and Java backend as part of this. Now, by the way, when you do your Docker Compose, there are Docker Compose examples where if you're doing it as part of the Docker Compose process. This case, I'm actually built a container already, and now I'm actually going to host an application in it, because I'm going to go one step above just the standard NPM, as part of the Docker Compose. But I'm also going to build this container image and publish it into Artifactory. I'm going to test it. I'm going to publish its results in. I'm going to scan it with XRay. I'm going to publish. I'm actually going to, check to see if it's okay. I'm not failing it in this case, just so you know. And then I'm going to promote it from one stage to the next. And if I were to show you what this job looks like, it's very simple. We have an Artifactory plugin for all major CIs. And if we don't, you can use our JFrog CLI also. But if you look here, I'm using the Artifactory plugin, and I'm parameterizing. These are parameters that I'm putting in, right? So server URL and credentials. And here's I want to get the latest version of my Node front end, something I've already built this, and now I want to host it. This is a very typical scenario. I built something, now I want to host it in an image, right? This is very much a best practice you can do, but anyway. And I have a function that I wrote here where I'm actually, in this case, right here, get UI, I'm actually querying Artifactory using our language called AQL, the Artifactory query language, to say, hey, go to this release repository, right, SDLC, give me the latest version, I want to host it. And then I'm going to build it right here using a standard Docker build command. I'm going to publish all that information about this build into Artifactory. I'm going to perform a very silly unit test. I'm pulling it down. I'm doing a curl towards the Docker image and say, do I get 200 okay? Just to kind of show you, it's right here. If I get 200 okay response from a curl, I'm good. That means it works. But then I'm also going to say, I want to publish information that says it passed my functional test. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to X-ray scan it. And I'm going to say artifactory.xray scan. And I'm not failing the build, just so you know. And then I'm going to say promote it from its source to its destination. I'm going to call it released, right? These are all things you can do. I give talks on this, and there's plenty of examples. I'm not going to go into all the detail on this, but I want to show you what I did. Now I want to show you the results. So first of all, this was promoted. It was released. It contains critical issues. But, as a developer, if I'm doing this and I get a notification that something is terrible, that something is bad, well, you know what? I am going to go ahead and I want to see. So a typical Docker registry looks like this. Doesn't mean anything. You do a Docker run, a Docker pull, and a Docker run, magic happens. If you follow our procedures and best practices, I could say, here's the version of the Node front end and the Java backend I'm hosting in this container with all its dependencies. By the way, I'm going to show you, it's the OS, it's the runtime, it's the actual application layer. You're not just in this single mindset. This is the whole enchilada, as you would say. I'm hungry. It's lunchtime. I need food. But anyway, one of the nice things you could do is that quick remediation. And this is where I talked about, where I've had examples where customers are like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. What if build number 82 is terrible? You get a notification that there's a problem, from an exploit, but it's deeper than that. It's functionally terrible. Well, I know that this one is hosting, excuse me, this version of the Node front end and this version of the Java backend. I can actually do a diff between build number 80, which is the previous version, and the new one. Well, you know what? The Node front end stayed the same, but the Java backend changed. Like that, I was able to go in and see one change, and now I can explore it. When we also do the X-ray scanning, by the way, you can scan your image using, if you wanted to, utilizing, the JFrog CLI and stuff like that. We actually have like these functions, built in for you to do those level of audits. But the thing is like, this one's got, this is, by the way, this is my disaster masterpiece, as I call it. This is one that has, 1,670 violations. It's terrible. But the thing is, though, it's all about, as a developer, understanding, or even as a, even if I'm a production engineer, a release manager, a release engineer, QA, or anything, if I find these issues, I want to know what it's affecting. I want to know how I can remediate it. I mean, here's an example. Now, this actual Spring, this is something that everybody uses. Spring framework, it's everywhere. And if I got this issue, it's a critical issue. If I go in here, I can show you the summary. And if you look, somebody just did a cut and paste. This is terrible. But our research team maybe did a little more research. Well, we did. And we actually gave you more of a detailed information. And I want to fix this quickly. Well, we even have remediation right here. You could upgrade, or you could actually go ahead and actually migrate the deployment by changing something. But I'll show you one better. I'll just show you one of my favorite ones. Here's fast, right? I'm going to type in fast. Here's a Jackson issue. Typical thing, right? Cut and paste. Terrible. I get nothing from that. But as a developer, I can go in and say, oh, you know what? This is critical, but you know what? Sometimes the library might have 100 functions in it. One's bad. Do I really want to throw the whole thing out? Am I using it? We will have applicability soon, by the way. I won't talk about that yet. But in here, the thing is that the original source tells me nothing. Cut and paste. What does that mean? I'm just going to get rid of this library. Well, our research team said, oh, yeah, well, here's the issue. And actually, it's only one function. And we've actually said if you change the mapper style in this, it should work okay. And we've also included stuff like you can deploy and upgrade. Here's a patch for it, or you can just change the way you functionally use it. But the important part is check this out. And this is where we come into, is there things inside, right? So like if you did a Docker compose, check this out. I found this jar in a jar of a layer of an image of a build. I found this buried deep inside, and I can go and attribute to it. I can even export the software bill of materials from here. I could produce reports like violation, licensing, and security. I can see every license file that's in this, right? So I might have a compliance team that's like, tell me, please, what licenses are you using throughout your entire Docker container? This OS runtime application. I'm going to show you the most nerd-tastic view. I love this view. Here's my Node front end. Here's my Java backend. Here's my Docker image. I can expand this out and show you all the violations and even subgroupings of any of the dependencies that are in this tar.gz. I can even go ahead and view the component. I can even go ahead and assign it to another value. Maybe it's a critical, but I think it's low. But here's the big thing is, right, so issues. I can put all my JIRA tickets here, right? If I want to do some other remediation, I can actually do another diff, by the way, at the artifact dependency environmental system information level. So I can see if anything's changed. Did someone, did Jeremy leave the debug flag on? I don't know. I can also see its release history. But that's only one part, because here's the thing is that if you follow these best kind of practices, I say, okay, this is actually terrible. Well, let's go see it. I went from the Docker build, the Docker image that I want to have. Here's the actual tar.gz. I can see all the information around it. That's our information. I can see the package info and its dependencies, and I can see its effective permissions. I can look also too at any of the security flaws and things like that with its own XRay information. I can look at any properties that I might want to do, such as review later equals true. Maybe I flag this. I don't want to address it now. I want to do it later. But check this out. Remember before I talked about builds? Well, first of all, this tar-G was actually produced here. Here's the build. And where has it been used? Maybe this is a terrible build. It contains a high security flaw, right? UA, maybe like that UA parser, which is a Bitcoining fun stuff, right? I can say, well, here's where it's produced, but here's every place it's been used. I can tell you from a remediation at Shift 11 be like, oh, yep, you know what? We've used these in all these Docker builds, but you know what? Let's go in and take a look at the build. Here's the build that produced it. Well, here's my tar-GZ that I've been hosting. I can show you all 482 transitive dependencies around it. I can actually diff it with another version at some point and say, hey, did anything change? I can see its release history if there was one here. Here's the Jira tickets I've got associated to it. I can still diff between them. So this gives me another level of accountability as a developer, as a release engineer, as InfoSec. I can even go in and say I get notified that something is terrible. Like here, I'll grab one of these, right? I'll grab Babel. There's a Babel package. Now this is applicable across all package types. So it's just like, I just happen to have an NPM project handle. But what if I go in and Babel 626.3 is going to leak all the data you have throughout time. It's terrible. Let's go look at it. Well, once again, read me instructions. Now, here's where the guy told me, he's like, this is the greatest remediation I've ever seen. And basically a way for me to do my job more expediently is, well, it doesn't look like it was built by anybody, but it's been used in 28 builds that we've had. Wow, we've been exposing ourselves for a while. Also, too, what repository it is in, I can go trace it back. Here's its own XRay data. And also, I've used our distribution side. Where was it distributed it to? Now, I only have about 13 minutes left, and I want to show one more thing. I saw somebody talk about, like we actually, I'll just so you're aware, I'll type in JFrog, I'll say log for J, right? So if you were looking for it before, by the way, we actually did. We did release a tool when it was actually announced. And I'll put this in the chat for anybody who wants to actually have a, this little guy right here. This is actually a free tool that we actually opened to the public. That you can actually go and scan all your open source projects, any of the projects you produce. And plus also, we also released a whole, article on a cookbook on remediation on how various ways to fix this. But just to kind of show you, one of the first things you could do in here, let me go to my big one, is you could always say, if you get a CVS score notification, right? And I'm just going to go in here, let me kill that. I'm going to click here, and I actually already have a CVS score. So I have a CVE here that CVE that somebody sent me. And I click on here. And what this is going to do is I put the CVE into compliance, and it's going to go in, like I said, parameters like licensing, severity, and whatnot. But if I click on builds, right away, this is showing me all the builds that actually this actual component is actually been part of. I can say this CVE, all these builds right here are affected by it. And I can go view any of these builds that I want. I can tell you what artifacts are exposed. If this was released into production with our release bundles. Here's all the packages that actually contain this, right? So I can actually go in and take a look at all the, the packages itself. And is there any versions? My God, there is. Well, you know what? Here's that version we were looking at. Let's see, is there any repositories? Well, yeah, this is part of our cache. It looks like it's been downloaded 212 times. Here's its XRay data, and you know what? It's got some security vulnerabilities, which are right here. See how quickly I'm able to go in and do research on what I've used, how I've used it, what are the remediation possibilities? It's all there. And having the tool sets and the inclination and just understanding not only what you're bringing in, but what you produced and where you've used it is really where our products excel, even down to the fact that I can go in as part of this at any point and I can produce a report. And I can say I need to get a vulnerability, a violation, or a license diligence report on repositories, builds, or whatnot. So I can say, you know what? I want to go ahead and look at violations. I'm going to go look at it by repositories. I'm going to say all my test repositories. So let's go do that. I'm also going to say my npm. So let's go do my remote repository. I'm going to hit save, and I'm just going to get everything. I just want everything. I don't care. And let's see here. Oh, I need to give it a report name, right? So I'm going to say npm bad stuff, right? In this case, so I could type today once again, and let's go ahead and generate the report. And then this is going to go ahead and scan the artifacts that I have there, as you're seeing here. And then I can go ahead and click on this, and this will actually produce a report on the actual components that are terrible, including things like here's a broken version of the actual CVS's score, right, for V2, and here's one for V3. And then on top of that, I can actually see all the little details about it. So remember, any tool can go detect any sort of vulnerability and violations. There's tons of them out there. But the thing is having the correlated information for you to do your job more effectively, more efficiently, and more rapidly, because let's face it, some of these security issues, if you don't address them right away, you are potentially in bad shape. So the thing is I want you guys to understand that we have all the tools and resources that are available to you. We have all this knowledge out there. We produce things on a regular basis. Google is your friend. Like I said, I know there were some things here about, I couldn't find NPM. We actually, if you just did our, JFrog, say Log4j, we did a ton of things on this. We actually gave a bunch of open source tools to the community to help everybody out, because let's face it, we have to stop this whole mentality idea of, us versus them in terms of like my company versus yours. The thing is that these kind of issues, these kind of things that happen for a reason. And we as a community, as a series of developers, non-dependent on where we are in terms of our status, when we do our jobs or whatever, it's our job to combat this all together. I know I sound all hippie-ish, don't I? But at the same time, we really do. We need to go ahead. This is a systemic issue that's affecting everybody out there. And having the right tool sets and the ability, using policies and launches, IDE, CLI, CI integration, right? Automated behind the scenes tooling really is where we excel and where we can really help you. So I want to thank you today. I hope this has been informative, and be safe, everybody. Be wonderful, be well. I will actually, since we have one more thing, I'll just show you, by the way. So we can say, if you just type in Artifactory and you say Docker compose, right? If I could type, we have some great examples here on how to do it. So if you look, we actually have some Docker compose examples you should be able to find. Thank you so much. And if there's any questions, you can ask them now. If not, remember, go sign up for your free tier. You can do all the things I showed you, utilizing the free tier as a sandbox. But you know what? Be safe, be wonderful, be well, everybody. And thank you so much. And I truly appreciate it. All right. I will stop sharing. I think we're good.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Bill. It was such a great workshop, and we were so happy to have you all here. Join us for our next workshop on our communities page. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Cheers.